I would really like to see in the future more researchers to be at events like this, because we're actually here to talk about research services that's supposed to help researchers. But how about administrators? Okay. Providers, and by that I mean technology providers, providers of research services, and so on. Okay, cool. There are probably other relevant categories that I am not mentioning, so sorry if I left you out. But I'm here to talk about EUDAT, and I'll give firstly an overview and then run through the core services. Then I'll talk a bit about community involvement, UIO's participation, because I think that's good to know about since we are here at UIO. And then I want to talk about 2 use cases just to make concrete what EUDAT can do for research, because sometimes it's like, okay, this is very nice, we can run virtual machines and we have all of these nice things, but how do we do science with it? So I'm going to try to make that concrete and then talk about sustainability. And the reason why we have to talk about sustainability is because let's say you get funding for a project and you make nice things, and then you adopt that as a researcher, and then what if the service just goes away? Will you ever adopt it in the first place? So, important question to answer, and especially for EUDAT as well. So, EUDAT 2020 is a project funded by the European Commission, and it has 36 partners. These partners are HPC centers, data centers, and research institutions. It's a 3-year project, and it will end in March 2018. And the reason the project exists, one of many, but the core one, is that research infrastructures face similar challenges. All of them face the challenge of growing amount of data. Everyone wants to make it easier to find data, and everyone wants to make the most of it. So there's a shared problem being addressed in many different places. And EUDAT is trying to promote synergies. Oh, wow, I just used synergy in a presentation. Okay. And so it's trying to develop common services, trying to identify which are these common problems that different research infrastructures are addressing, and then trying to solve that, and then offer a service to research infrastructures, so to make their lives easier. And by way of that, make the lives of researchers easier, hopefully. So it's trying to optimize cost and investment in that way too. And this is really important for the European Commission because it is investing all over the place in different projects, but that might be trying to solve the same problem again and again. So the idea is to integrate research and e-infrastructures to provide pan-European solutions, and to do that by having a cooperation between different centers and research communities. So we've seen this idea of a data lifecycle mentioned in many presentations, but EUDAT tries to position its services to be relevant at different stages of the data lifecycle. So if we just run through a hypothetical lifecycle, let's say you start off by creating some data either with an experiment or with some observations, and then you process it, and then you want to analyze it. But before you can process the data, you need to move data. So B2Stage is a service that allows you to move data to HPC centers. And after you've analyzed it, you want to preserve it. So B2Safe is a service for safe replication. So you can store it in Tromsø, but maybe you want to store it in Sweden as well, because maybe for some reason Norwegian infrastructure planning doesn't make it, in the future. We all hope it will. But so yeah, like replicating across borders is one way to keep your data safe for the very long term as well. And then you also want to share this data. You don't want it to just be there in some corner. So B2Share exposes metadata about data and also gives you the ability to download the data. And then B2Find makes this metadata catalog searchable by indexing it. And you can also, if you have your own archive, share your metadata with EUDAT, so that a user of EUDAT could search, in effect, your archive without the data ever leaving your archive. And then lastly, we come back to the creating data. So let's say now this wonderful cycle has completed and a new researcher comes along and reuses the data that was created. Then they deposit it into B2Drop from B2Share, and then they have it available on their machine, and magic happens. So EUDAT is trying to build solutions with research communities, and this is a way to ensure that what they, I could say we because I'm participating in it, but what we want to ensure that what we make is relevant to research. So if researchers are involved in the process of making it, then there's a higher likelihood of that happening. So the core communities, and a core community is someone that receives project funding, are Clarin, Ines, Elixir, EPOS, ICOS, and ELTER. So spanning different disciplines as well. Another way that EUDAT is involved with communities is through something that is called data pilots. And this is a formal collaboration between a research community and EUDAT working on a specific scientific project. And the collaboration is usually justified because they want to make use of EUDAT services in a non-standard way. So perhaps data replication capabilities are not tailored to this specific science case. So then EUDAT says, okay, but let's do a data pilot. So if you have needs as a researcher, or if you know about a project that has special needs, maybe at the European level, a data pilot would be the way to engage with EUDAT. And it's quite a large audience of researchers that is being reached, and some petabytes of data in question. So for the project, it is a significant effort. UIO's role, we participate via Sigma2, and we work in 5 different areas. So firstly, we work in strategy and policy, especially with regards to EU data regulation, and then also in the community requirements and engagement. And there we map the research data landscape. What that means is that we interview different research communities and research infrastructures and try to understand what their data challenges are and feed that back into the project strategy. We do service development, especially in data replication and related tools, and operations for authentication, authorization, and identity. That's a mouthful, but basically when you log into stuff, so that's that. And data replication policies. And lastly, we're also involved in a work group for sensitive data. So it's interesting to see that a project like EUDAT, which started off addressing only open data, which is a very popular theme, is now also addressing sensitive data. And this is also an interesting finding. So I'm involved in the community requirements and engagement, among other things. And the more we speak to communities, the more we realize that there is no one-size-fits-all open access that can be acted on. We need a much more nuanced understanding of it, and that leads to different service offerings. So we need to continue working with that concept and see what it means for different communities. So just to make concrete then, I want to talk about 2 data pilots, 2 use cases. The first one is Herbadrop. So what they aim to do is long-term preservation of herbarium specimen images. So there are 22 million images in, specimens, sorry, in Germany, 20 million in France, and 500 million worldwide. So now you have a challenge of so this isn't the data, but the source that will generate the data, the source being distributed all over the world, over different boundaries. And what they will do is they will use optical character recognition to generate high-definition images. And so they're doing that, and so far they've generated 15 terabytes. And what they want to do is they want to use EUDAT's B2Safe replication to make sure that this valuable data will actually last into the future. And so they're not only going to bring together the data across borders into one place where you can access it, they're also going to distribute it across Europe. So if one site doesn't make it, the data is available somewhere else. And it will be useful in many different disciplines, and also outside of science for conservationists and policymakers. The second case, more closely related to social sciences, is Europeana. And Europeana is a cultural heritage institution. And EUDAT has a data pilot where they want to enrich the Europeana newspapers. So they have 11 million pages of historical newspapers. And they want to expose and improve the text. So I'm not a linguist, so I'm a bit out of my depth here. When I say something about named entities, I'm not really sure what that means, but they basically want to enable new research cases on top of the text corpus. And they want to do this across multiple languages, which makes it really interesting. So they're going to develop data citation standards, and then they will make it available through the metadata search facility of EUDAT. And they will also ensure that it is safely replicated with B2Safe. So if these are things that you're facing in your projects, similar challenges, or if you want to replicate your data to different countries, perhaps you should consider using EUDAT services. Lastly, I want to just pause on the sustainability of services. So in the European project world, there's something that they call a project near-death experience, and that's like towards the end of the project. There's this uncertainty whether it will be funded again, and that's the near-death experience. And then you clamor for a call, and then you get funding, and then, okay, service development continues. And that's not really good enough if you are aiming for long-term support, preservation of data, replication. You need to have trust from the community that your services will be there. So when EUDAT 2020, the project ends in March 2018, the consortium will continue under the auspices of what they call the CDI agreement. And CDI is for Collaborative Data Infrastructure. It is a 10-year agreement to guarantee the operations of services that are already in place. And it has already been signed by 18 members. More signatories are queued up to join. Additionally, there is a joint proposal with EGI, which is grid computing, and Indigo Data Cloud, which is a cloud project for science, for the new eInfra 12 call. And the eInfra 12 call is the next big e-infrastructure funding round from the European Commission. And it's quite significant that EUDAT is joining forces with EGI, because on the one hand you have EUDAT, which is data, and EGI, which is compute, and you can see that they're actually trying to come together and address these needs. And we saw in Andreas's presentation that e-infrastructures are recognizing the need to address both data and compute when they design systems. So at the European level, this is also happening. And then lastly, about sustainability, the European Commission is in a process of consolidating all of its projects. And they have started a new project called the European Open Science Cloud, which is now in a pilot. And there is a coordination between the e-infra 12 call and the European Open Science Cloud, so that the work done in the e-infra 12 project delivers the infrastructure necessary to power the European Open Science Cloud. So all of this together is the strategy for EUDAT's long-term survival, to align it with the European Commission's goals for consolidating e-infrastructures. And if you want to know more, you can follow EUDAT.eu on Twitter, or you can email me. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Leo, for sharing this. Please don't go away. We have food that just arrived.